I'm Frances Lynch, and I'm the Artistic Director of the Electric Voice Theatre, and I'm here at Conway Hall in their library reading a book, and it's called Is Peace Possible by Kathleen Lonsdale.
Is Peace Possible? A Quaker scientist discusses problems of peace, freedom and justice in an era of expanding world population and technical development.
And it's given me the germ of an idea, or should I say, the molecule of an idea, to build a project around Kathleen Lonsdale, who was a
very, very important, very well-practiced crystallographer who made lots of very important discoveries, and she was one of the first 2 women elected as a Fellow of the Royal Society. But on top of that, I think she's very interesting because she was a Quaker, she fervently believed in peace, she was a very, very busy, a very active woman, and she was constantly campaigning to ban nuclear weapons, and also she campaigned extensively on behalf of women and thought that more women should be encouraged to reach the top levels of science.
We can build this molecule into a project with the help of young people, artists, musicians, writers, archivists, Quakers, scientists and historians.
Well, she was born in 1903, and when she was 5, her mother brought the children, the mother abandoned the husband, she brought the children over to live in Essex, and then she was at university and graduated and started work in the decade after the First World War. And she went on actively researching right up to her death until 1971. It was in 1945 that she was elected as one of the first 2 female fellows of the Royal Society.
She was not a professor when she obtained her FRS. She obtained that in 1945, then started remarkably as a reader at UCL, and it wasn't until the end of the 1940s that she then obtained her chair and became a professor in the Department of Chemistry.
The first female professor appointed at University College London, which happens to be celebrating 200 years this year.
Being, one of the first female professor at UCL is always a massive thing. UCL has generally been very progressive in a lot of ways with these kinds of things, and I think celebrating these first is an important part of the UCL culture and the history, and to remind everybody that's a big part of what UCL is about, is being the kind of the forefront not only of science but also of putting diverse opinions and people forwards and out there. Times have moved on, still there is an underrepresentation of women in higher academic positions, and so I think celebrating high achieving women with the understanding, as you said, of all the things that supported and enabled that to happen, I think is such a powerful way to push women to excel further and achieve their full potentials.
Also, I think grateful and influenced and have respect for Kathleen Lonsdale because she was one of the first 2 women to be elected to the Royal Society. And I was elected in 2017 and find that it's a very welcoming and keen to support women.
For the Royal Society, being one of the first 2 women to have been elected fellows, I think for them that's their landmark. For chemistry, and I don't know whether Kathleen would have described herself as a chemist because she studied maths and then physics, but the applications of her work are really felt in chemistry.
You look at any A-level textbook, these students will be taught about benzene, and they will be taught about kekule. Now, he was a professor, a German professor in the 19th century, and he'd worked out the formula for benzene, which was 6 carbons and 6 hydrogens, and he could not work out how they were put together until he had a dream of a snake biting its own tail and realised they must be arranged in a circle. And various people over the next few decades tried to work out, is this a hexagon, is it deformed, is it regular, and that kind of thing. Now, benzene is a liquid, so you can't do what's called X-ray crystallography with it, but hexamethylbenzene forms very nice white crystals, a bit like the salt crystals you get on your table. Kathleen Lonsdale recrystallised hexamethylbenzene and worked out the diffraction pattern and worked out that it was indeed a regular hexagon.
scientists still build models of those molecules in order to teach and in order to display the structure. But she used ping pong balls to show the individual atoms within complex molecules. She was a very active table tennis player.
The sculpture's made, it's a maquette, so it's an idea for a larger sculpture. This one has been made out of plaster with metal, and the base also mirrors the hexagon and the circle.
And as a chemist, he loves the hexagon, which is essentially the shape of benzene.
What is important is this hexagonal structure. So this hexagonal structure with carbons, and indeed you can get it with other atoms, nitrogen and so forth. This flat hexagonal structure is key to molecules in biology such as DNA.
Even everything that I do in terms of the structure of DNA, we rely upon that work, essentially.
Everything I do within my career, I'm often using these benzene rings in various different structures. And so there is a commonality in terms of her discoveries and her work that has impacted on people like myself and others that work in the area of organic chemistry.
So that's why I think she should be remembered, because this was a major discovery and it had major impact in organic chemistry and in science generally in the 20th century. Crick and Watson and Wilkins and Franklin would not have been able to work out what the structure of DNA is without this discovery earlier. It also underpins things like organic semiconductors. So the OLEDs you get on your TV, your watch and so forth, they are all much more complicated versions of this molecule, but they all depend on this. And many drugs that have been discovered over the years. I mean, aspirin has as its core this six-membered ring, and understanding the structure of these things is absolutely key to working out how they interact with the biological molecules they're either trying to turn on or turn off.
Aspects of health and medicine, how we got through the pandemic with the vaccines, and I think she would have been delighted to see how crystallography is at the heart of so many sciences, from being able to give that atomic molecular level picture of the solid state.
Towards the end of her life, she switched the area of her research. She was still a crystallographer, but she started doing research into illnesses, and she looked at things in the human body, things like bladder stones, and looking at their molecular structure. So I think that's another example of her philanthropic instinct, that she turned towards medicine away from sort of mainline chemistry.
In particular, using the kind of physics and the understanding of physics and imaging for biomedical research is something that I've always been really passionate about, and I think talking with you guys, it's something that Kathleen maybe was also very kind of interested in.
She was not born, to use a colloquial phrase, she was not born with a silver spoon in her mouth. I mean, she came from an extremely poor and disadvantaged background. I think we have to give a lot of credit to her mother for recognising how brilliant her little girl was and encouraging her to go to school, encouraging her to take up scholarships, sending her to the boys' school to learn maths and physics because she couldn't learn them at the girls' school, watching her daughter, encouraging her daughter as she went on through university, staying on to do a research degree. And she ended up moving in a social world that was completely different from the background that she'd been brought up in, although she remained very close to her mother and they were a close-knit family.
She was very grounded in her family as well. And so she seemed to have this balance, and in terms of science, linking those different threads of her life together in a very balanced way to be successful, despite the challenges of women scientists at the time.
She had 3 children and 10 grandchildren, and she remained very, very close to all of them and led a very, very active family life, as well as this professional scientific life, as well as all her activities in trying to establish peace and trying to promote penal reform. So there were many, many aspects to her life, and she was phenomenally busy.
Seeing how much she was able to do, not just in her science, but across these wide range of areas of life is incredibly inspiring.
Part of her success was the fact that she had a supportive family and a supportive husband, and we all need that.
I was really impressed by something that Kathleen had written, because it is exactly the same advice that I give to somebody who's considering a career in academia and saying, well, how do I balance that with having a family? And you can take exactly the same advice from Kathleen, because she said in one of her writings about women in science, she said, for a woman, and especially a married woman with children, to become a first-class scientist, she must first of all choose or have chosen the right husband. And he must recognise her problems and be willing to share them. And that's essentially what he did. If he is really domesticated, so much the better.
One thing that I find particularly interesting, she had these 3 children and managed to maintain her career as a woman with children in science, like understanding those parallels as well is really interesting.
Throughout her life, she supported younger women. She acted very, very strongly according to her moral principles. She was guided by being a Quaker. She was absolutely adamant that there should be peace in the world, that scientists should use their research to improve the world rather than building atomic bombs. She felt that scientists in the more developed countries in Europe and America had a responsibility to help out scientists in poorer, less developed countries in the world. So, I mean, she was an absolute campaigner for all sorts of very, very high ideals.
I think she stands out as a woman of faith, in the Quaker tradition, which isn't dogmatic, and that fits in very well with her attitude to science, curiosity, seeking to find out, belief in order of things and belief in a better world.
And she was in her early 30s when she and her husband both decided to convert to the Quaker religion. And it's often said that science and religion are polar opposites, but for her, her science, her religion, her attitudes towards her children were all threaded together. She believed very much in having an open, inquiring mind, in learning for yourself rather than accepting received dogma, which is what a lot of religions do. Quakers, when they went into science, rather than going for very mathematical physics and chemistry, they tended to engage in subjects like biology and astronomy, because for them, understanding God's world was part of the getting nearer to God and understanding God's splendor. She was born in Ireland as the youngest of 10 children to an extremely poor family, and emerged at the end with all sorts of honours. I mean, she was Dame of the British Empire, she was a Fellow of the Royal Society, she was head of all sorts of scientific organisations. And she got there through some hard work, perseverance, brilliance, but I think that's a wonderful story which needs to be told.